can be seated. It's kind of reminded me of one of the first sermons I ever preached many years ago. With a young man took Linda, and we went off to some little country church, and the fan was blowing, the notes blew away. So anyway, on behalf of our family, I want to take this opportunity to thank you all for being here. What a tribute to Dad that this is. There's several of the past ministers that have been here at Levy that are here today. There's two gentlemen back here in the back that worked with Dad at Pricefield Electric many, many years ago before Dad started his own company. And then it's honored by a group from Arnold and Blevins, current employees here today. But on behalf of my sister Sharon, my brother Larry, Miss Kathleen, Scott, Kelly, Shannon, we are honored to have you here today. Dad was an awesome man, and he touched the lives of so many people throughout his life. Our family has been a part of the Levy Church here for 60-something years, ever since it started. Dad was an elder for many of those years. Even though he resigned as an elder when Mom got sick, the elders would still turn to Brother B for guidance. I even talked to Ted and I a while ago, and he said for over 50 years, Dad has guided him and Barbara on a lot of the most important decisions they ever made in their life. What a tribute. Well, it doesn't end here today. Dad has left us a legacy. And if he could be standing here today, he would tell you, guys, follow in my footsteps. You see, Dad had the heart of a servant. He took his greatest pleasure in helping others. Some of you in this audience today may be among those that he has helped in some way from time to time. And he would expect each one of us kids, his grandkids, to pass this legacy on down for years to come. Kathleen asked me to read two different things today. First, I will be reading from Psalms chapter 1, verses 1 through 3. By the way, I shared with some this morning, the Bible that I'll be reading out of is the one that my family gave Dad on Christmas in 1975. And Sharon and Dad have been going through some pictures and different things, and she brought me this New Testament. And I just thought it was fitting to read from it today. Blessed is the man that walketh not in the counsel of ungodly, nor standeth in the way of sinners, nor sitteth in the seat of scornful. But his delight is in the law of the Lord, and in his law doth he meditate day and night. And he shall be like a tree planted in the rivers of water, that bringeth forth his fruit in his season. His leaf shall not wither, and whatever he doeth shall prosper. That was my dad. The other thing that she asked me if I would read is a poem that I wrote to my dad on Father's Day some 25, 30 years ago. And I'd like to share that with you. It's simply titled, My Dad. There's a man in whom I'm very proud, and from the highest mountain I would shout aloud of the wonderful love he has brought into my life. He's always there through troubles and strife. When it seems you need that special friend, He's always there through thick and thin. That's why I'm so very proud. That special man is you, my dad. I added one extra verse this past week. Now he's gone to his heaven above, or his home above, but he has left us all with an abundance of love. In thinking of Dad this past week, and I shared with Gary and Danny that I have almost 67 years of stories that I could tell about my dad. Bill has over 50 years of stories. Gary Neal over 25 years. Danny's the young one with only 5, but I think Danny got almost a lifetime in those 5 years of being with Daddy Will. But there was a passage that came to mind as I thought about Dad, and I wanted to describe Dad, or try to tell people who my dad was. Matthew chapter 25, beginning in verse 31, when the Son of Man shall come in his glory and all the holy angels with him, he will sit upon his throne of glory. And before him shall be gathered all nations, and he shall separate them one from another, as a shepherd divideth his sheep from the goats. And he shall set the sheep on the right hand, but the goats on the left. I want to skip verse 34 for just a second. Because the Lord told him, for I was hungry, and you gave me meat. I was thirsty, and you gave me drink. I was a stranger, and you took me in. Naked, and you clothed me. I was sick, and you visited me. I was in prison, and you came unto me. Well, these people he was talking to, replied, well, when did we do these things? Dad had already read the scripture. So he already knew that when he was serving others, he was doing the things that the Lord wanted him to do. He taught his children. He taught many of you those same attributes, and that's to be a giver. Well, I skipped verse 34 because last Saturday afternoon at 2:45 in the afternoon, Dad heard these words. Then shall the king say unto them on his right hand, come ye blessed of my Father, inherit the kingdom you have prepared for you from the foundation of the world. Dad heard that, and Dad has gone on home. As many of you know, my dad was a very rich man, and I'm sure that if he hadn't gave all of his wealth away, he would have probably had a lot of money in the bank. But he didn't keep it for himself. He shared with his family. He shared with his friends. He shared with a stranger on the street that needed his help. One final passage in Matthew chapter 6, verses 19 and 20. Lay not up for yourselves treasures upon the earth, where moth and rust and dust corrupt, where the thieves break through and steal. But lay up for yourselves treasures in heaven, where neither moth nor rust corrupt, and where thieves did not break through and steal. That's what Dad did. He punched his ticket for this journey he's been on when he was a very young man. And now he has finished his journey. And he's gone on to be with his Father in heaven.
Song leaders rarely have an opportunity to talk.
There's a reason for that. You usually don't want song leaders to talk. But I would like to say one thing. Back in 2010 and 2011, your family surrounded my family and carried us through the loss of my father and my mother. I'm extraordinarily and forever grateful for that. And I'm honored to be able to take just a small part in honoring Brother LT today. Let's praise God together in song.
Lavelle Travis L.T. Blevins was a family man. Born on May 30th, 1927 to Robert and Myrtle Blevins in Beattyville, Arkansas. L.T. traveled around the globe in the Navy, World War II, and Korea, on various mission trips and for pleasure with those he loved. Although he served in the Navy as a teen, he returned home to find love. He married Dorothea Lou McDonald on August 3rd, 1947. They had 3 children, 7 grandchildren, 20 great-grandchildren, and 1 great-great-granddaughter, and several foster children. Daddy Vale, as he was known to his family, left a lifetime of memories to his children. Sharon and her husband Bill Arnold of Sherwood, and daughters Carol and Rachel, their daughters Carol and Rachel, Robert Bob Blevins of Sherwood, and sons Robert and Jared, Larry and his wife Jan Blevins of Tyler, Texas, and children Michael, Erica, and Travis. His stories, the twinkle in his eye, the giggles, and the whistling will surely be missed. L.T. became an elder at the Levy Church of Christ in 1962 and served in that capacity for about 33 years. He not only served as an elder, but as a Bible class teacher and mentor who is loved by his church family. It was during a church ministry following Dorothea's death in 1998 that L.T. found love again with Kathleen Edmondson Fryer. They married in 2001, and LT became stepfather to Kathleen's 3 children, Shannon, Jarrett, Kelly, her husband Curtis Rickard, and Scott and his wife Linda Fryer. An electrician by trade, LT started Blevins Electric Company in 1967. Through his leadership, the company became a highly profitable business and staple in North Little Rock. The company now, Arnold and Blevins Electric, is one of the top electrical contracting businesses in Central Arkansas. Mr. B, to his employees, LT loved going to the shop and visiting with everyone every chance he could. He will be missed greatly by all the electricians he mentored through the years. LT gained his heavenly reward on July 10th, 2016. He lived a life of adventure that included his family and friends, but most importantly, he had the heart of a servant and gained more pleasure in helping others than anything else he did. In the words of a dear family member, the master became the servant. That was our Daddy Vale. We will celebrate his life. That's today. Last year, I wrote a blog about Brother B, that's what I called him, and the family has asked me to read that to you. It's entitled The Power of an Ordinary Story. Ordinary is an interesting word. It was a word once used for some of Christ's disciples in Acts 4:13. It usually denotes nothing special, average, normal, nothing to see here, so just keep moving on. An ordinary story? I'll pass. Give me the extraordinary, the dramatic one, filled with exciting special effects. The tearjerkers. Those move the needle. Those create blockbusters and bestsellers. Ordinary is just not interesting until it is. Until ordinary reveals something else. Those Jesus followers in Acts 4 certainly were ordinary guys without any special pedigree, but there was something special and quite different about them. What was it? It was noted that they had been with Jesus. Jesus had a way of making ordinary interesting. I'm not sure that Lavelle Travis, L.T. Blevins, would ever be considered just ordinary, but his story has ordinary beginnings. Born during the Great Depression in the small backwater Arkansas Delta community of Gordneck, L.T. grew up, like so many others of his era, poor but happily surrounded by a loving family. Again, like thousands of his contemporaries, L.T. answered his nation's call and served in the U.S. Navy during both World War II and the Korean conflict. He married his sweetheart, began a family, started a successful small business, and worked diligently to provide and care for them. On the surface, this describes an ordinary life. It was the kind lived all across America. Yes, he lost his first wife too soon. He retired early to care for her. Later, he had serious health concerns of his own from which he was not expected to survive. But really, that is all fairly common. It's normal. L.T. Blevins, not much interesting to see here, so let's just keep moving on. But before you do, I ask you to look a little closer. There's more to this ordinary story. Remember how I stated that Jesus has a way of making the ordinary interesting. If you spend any time around L.T. Blevins, it becomes obvious he has been with Jesus. He had just turned 88. The ever-present twinkle in his eye reveals a joyful soul shaped through the years by his relationship with Christ. He has this wonderful, adventurous side that once led him to wrangle horses on the backlots of Hollywood movie westerns after World War II, ride across the country on a Harley knucklehead motorcycle, fly and crash without lessons or license a small plane, and physically build a lake house with his second wife Kathleen while in his 70s. He has all kinds of extraordinary stories to share. But his most extraordinary stories are about being with Jesus. They're about his beloved Levy Church of Christ in North Little Rock, Arkansas. Its beginnings, its growth, its ministry. He has been there through it all, serving as teacher, shepherd, cook, missionary, and everything in between. Always here, always faithful. He reared his family here, now into their 4th generation. He carried the burden of leadership. He made personal and financial sacrifices for the Levy family. He mentored the current generation of leaders. he did not waver. He never created any drama. He is a peacemaker, a visionary, and a great friend to preachers. He has been with Jesus, just an ordinary man in some ways, made extraordinary through faith in the Christ. Just another boy from the Arkansas countryside, but one whose legacy of quiet dedication to God, family, and church continues to shape and influence them. He was a part of what has been tagged the greatest generation. Great because of sacrifice, hard work, and personal integrity. Once this was just considered ordinary and normal, it was simply how you were supposed to be. It certainly does describe LT. But that is not why this ordinary man is great. Rather, the greatest among you will be your servant. For whoever exalts himself will be humbled, and whoever humbles himself will be exalted. So says Jesus in Matthew 23:11 and 12. The power in this story really is found in the Christ and in the good, humble man who allowed Jesus to do the extraordinary within him. LT inspires me. Throughout his life, he just consistently did the right thing without any big fuss. It's an ordinary story, but it's not. It's a story of quiet and consistent faith lived out through the normal variations of life, but never wavering. I remember one summer camp session where several people shared their faith stories with the campers. All were dramatic and meaningful. One brother showed the needle marks on his arm and gave God the glory for empowering him to overcome his addiction. It certainly was a powerful story. But there's also the need to share the power in the stories absent of all this. A story of faith that never ventured away. That is the power I see in LT Blevins, in his story, and in his person, which is why it's so meaningful to me. It's the kind of life I wish to live, and for my children. Just consistently being with Jesus every day in a normal, ordinary, drama-free, yet incredible kind of way. As Bob mentioned, I only knew Brother B for 5 years. But I don't know if I've known anybody that's impacted my life more within that time frame. He lived an amazing life. I often encourage him to write it down and put it in a book. He would always respond to that by saying, well, chuckling, that little chuckle he had, and saying no one would ever want to read it. In the last few days, I've come to realize he did indeed write a book, and we, so to speak, are the pages. Every one of us were influenced by him in his fully lived, God-focused life. And we will continue to read a little bit of him in each one of us. I never grew tired of hearing his stories about World War II, growing up in Gordon Neck, living in California, working behind the scenes on the Western movies, about his family, his businesses, the Levy Church. And just when I thought I'd heard them all, maybe more than once, he would surprise me with a new one every now and then. As I mentioned in that blog, I love the twinkle in his eye when he shared those stories. I will miss hearing them and miss his gentle presence and steady encouragement in my life. One of the things that impressed me most about Brother B was he always continued to dream, always looked forward. To me, there was still a little boy inside Brother B that continued to see the world with wonder and look for ways to learn more about it. He was a great encouragement to me as a preacher. Supporting my efforts and my goals, he constantly told me to never settle and to never allow the church to settle. He always seemed out in front of the curve. When we did our first cardboard testimonial, which was a new concept at Levy, he was one of the first ones to sign up and the first one to cross the stage with his cardboard testimony. Of course, his life was a witness to Christ, from his work as a shepherd at Levy to him defying the odds on his own life-threatening illnesses. He always pointed to Jesus through that. One of the most incredible moments of my ministry was along with Hugh Hale baptizing LT Blevins again last year. After all he had done in serving God, he concluded that all those years ago in the Cache River, he was baptized because of a girl. I tried to talk him out of it. I said, Brother B, the fruit of the Spirit is evident in your life and has been for decades. I don't think you really need to do this. I think it's all good. But he insisted. He climbed these steps, and they're pretty steep if you've not been there at his age. And Hugh and I baptized him again. He was determined, and if you knew him, you knew when he was determined, he was going to do it regardless. In these 5 years that I knew him, we went fishing together with Bill. He took my daughters out to the Hoppers Pond, catfishing. We even did a little electrical work together, if you can believe that. He came to my house. I've got a little building out behind my house. I wanted some more outlets, and he came over and sat in a chair, taught me how to run a few wires, drill the studs, put them through there and connect them. We visited hospitals together. We ate many, many lunches together at Bellwood Diner. And once we made a memorable trip to Gordneck together. He showed me around Gordneck, where he used to live. We went down dirt roads and turn rows. Went down one turn row. I was driving his truck. I said, Brother B, it's getting kind of muddy. We might think about turning around. He said, no, we're going to go on down there. I want to show you where the house was. So on down the road we went. Couldn't go any further. I said, okay, I've got to back out of here now. It was pretty sloppy. And as I was backing out, the wheels started spinning. I thought, we're in trouble. And the one thing that kept going through my mind was Sharon's words to me before we left. She said, you better take care of my daddy. And I thought, oh no, what am I going to do? We'd seen a man back about a mile away out in the field. I told Brother B, I said, well, if we do get stuck, I'll walk back there to see if he helps. And there's no need for that. He's got a winch on the front of his truck, you know. And he said, I already see that tree right over there. We'll get out. But I wouldn't take anything for that trip. I picked up a rock. I got it in my office. Because he told the story, some of you may have heard, about kind of hijacking a load of gravel back in those days, in his younger days, and taking him and dumping him down there by his house. So we went there and we got out and walked around. There was gravel there. I said, Brother B, you think this is your gravel? He said, I don't know. It might be. I picked one up, got it on a shelf in my office now. You know, one of his heroes was John Wayne. Well, he was John Wayne to many of us. The last time I saw him was 2 days before a recent trip to Lithuania. Just got back Monday night. We went to Bellwood for lunch as normal. I knew he was concerned about the pain in his lungs. I'd accompanied him to the doctor a week before. We would always drive to the office. He would always drive to the office in his truck. And every time he'd say, don't tell them that I drove because my kids don't want me driving anymore. Then he would give me the keys and say, you take over from here. So after we got back from Bellwood that Monday, both of us had to get out of the truck. Quite often when we parted ways from those lunches, he would give me a hug. And he did this time. But this time he hugged a little longer and a little firmer. I never expected it was the last time I would ever see him. And he hugged me and said, I love you, bud. I love him too.
Some glad morning when this life is o'er, I'll fly away to a home on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory, I'll fly away. When I die, hallelujah, by and by, I'll fly away.
if he hadn't wanted so many preachers, he shouldn't have lived so long. He's lived through several of us. To say that this man was loved would be an understatement. I was blessed to have worked with this congregation for 25 years, serving under the tutelage of Brother Blevins and other shepherds of his quality. Danny mentioned the Bell Diner. When you were taken to the Bell Diner, you were on your way to becoming somebody. He didn't take me as often as he took Danny to Bell Diner, so Danny is more somebody than I am, I think. But I remember my first trip to Bell Diner with him. We walked in the door, and all you heard was the greetings of, "Hello, Mr. Blevins, hello, Mr. B, LT, hello, boss." And I thought, boss. And later I learned, I thought Bill was the boss. He wasn't. Mr. B was the boss at Arnold Blevins Electric. He was been mentioned about his leaving a mark, and every building here, he wanted to leave his mark on every building, and he did. The last edition, Bill just told me just the other day, he was saying, you need to get that thing started so I can leave my mark on that building also. And when Bill told me that, I said he needn't worry about leaving his mark on just buildings, because his mark was left on more than that. It's on scores of people. His concern for so many areas was so evident. He cared for the lost, and he was constantly teaching those that would listen. He called me one day and he said, mentioned this lady's name that I knew, and he said, "She's coming over to be baptized, and I want you to do the baptizing." And I said, "Mr. B, you need to do that." And then it dawned on me about his back, and he said, "No, I need you to do that." He said, "I'll make you a deal." He said, "I'll catch them and you string them." And that was the first time I'd talked about baptism, stringing somebody, but I guess it worked. He was a pioneer in so many things. Danny had mentioned about his here at Levy and his foresight, along with those other guys and the things that would happen at Levy. He was one of the pioneers of the Wednesday night meals, and I was out there with him on the first night of cooking spaghetti and had the thing boiling, and I'm thinking, how do you know when spaghetti is done? And next thing I know, he pulled a dipper out there and got one of those strands and just slung it against the wall, and it stuck. He said, "Dinner's ready." It took us a while to get the paste off of the wall from all the spaghetti he slung for the next few weeks, but I learned something. I officed with others for years. We were down in what we refer to lovingly as the dungeon, and I could, when the door would open, I'd hear the soft shuffle of his feet. I knew immediately who it was, and it's a semi-whistle and a semi-air leak that would coming from that sound of the shuffling feet, and I knew that Mr. B, or boss, had arrived. And one day I said, "Man, get in this house." And he walked in and sat down. I said, "Mr. Blevins, you've not had one whistling lesson, have you?" He said, "No, I haven't." It was pretty evident, but it was a signature for him. And those of us who are around him a lot can remember that slow air leak with a slight sound of a whistle with it, and I miss it. He told me, as the other guys, so many stories, and you'd have to get Dick Adcock to tell you a lot of them because Dick was involved in it. There was a time they shut down the Hoover Dam and I don't know what all else, doing some electrical work. But there was one of my favorites was he was going to his favorite river to go fishing, and there was a big log jam down there. So he knew where he was a very resourceful guy, liked the gravel. He could also find a road grader when he needed it. And he found some dynamite. He was going to go clear that river, that log jam. And when the dynamite went off, well, he picked up fish for a while. And then he noticed that the river was clear so he could use his boat. The log jam was just reason for going to get the dynamite. Fish was the reason, and he knew that. Bought more tickets to more benefit dinners than any man that I know of alive, and gave them away to many people. And without exception, every one of those benefit dinners fed one thing: chicken. And he would not eat chicken. And I asked him one time, I said, Mr. B, what is it about chicken? He said, boy, I was raised on chicken. I've ate so much chicken coming up. He said, I swore if I left a farm, I'd never eat another chicken. Guess what we had for lunch today? In his honor, no chicken, or chicken, and then the thing that really upset me was there was no banana pudding there. I know it was a sad occasion. But all you could see was Mr. B there, and one more ticket that we got to enjoy. I have a granddaughter. One of my granddaughters' name is Carissa. And Carissa was still nursing, and we had a potluck here at Levy, and Mr. B took over Carissa. He loved children, loved babies, and he took over with Carissa. Diana, my daughter-in-law, first baby, you know, and how protective mama bears are, and she's watching over this over here because Mr. B is holding that baby. And the next thing she knows, he is feeding Carissa her first solid food. And she looked at Colby and she said, what do we do? And he said, nothing. This is Mr. B, this is boss. And you know what he was feeding her? Banana pudding. She is a gorgeous young lady today and extremely smart. So feed your babies banana pudding. Don't worry about the nursing and that. They don't need all that stuff. Go straight to the food. Gifted in so many areas. He's one of those guys that could do anything. I mean, it didn't make any difference. He could do it. Woodworking was a craft that he picked up. I've been over with him and watched him sometimes, and he had no design. And I said, Mr. B, how do you know what to do with all that stuff? He said, well, I just see it. And if you would take a picture of whatever it was you wanted built and take it to him, he would build it. And I know we have a cradle that he built. My daughter Jennifer was carrying Lane at the time, and Mr. B said, I want to build a cradle for that baby. And he did. And we still have that wooden cradle today. And I said, how'd you build that? He said, well, I saw it one time on a picture. He was so gifted in so many areas. One day he stopped by the office to talk, and he said, Gary, you need to talk to Bill for me. I said, whatever about? He said, well, whenever I tell Bill I need a set of tires for my truck, he goes buy me a new truck. And I said, that's a bad thing? He said, well, yeah, but he said, I'm not going to outlive the truck I got now. And he goes and buys me a new truck because I need a set of tires. And then get rid of it. And then he told me, he said, I love you like a son. And I thought, boy, that's something. And then I thought, I'm in. So I called Bill, and I said, Bill, I need a set of tires. He said, call John Miller. I said, okay, I'm not that far in. But to be honest with you, thanks to Jonathan and Bill and A&B Electric, these guys have furnished me with a truck since I started to work in the rural areas of White County. I wonder where they learned that, this thing about giving and sharing from the boss. I believe that my brother and friend came to understand some things that maybe many of us yearn to know, and that is things about peace of mind and things about God that maybe troubles our minds. Psalm 63, verse 1 says, God, thou art my God. I shall seek thee earnestly. My soul thirsts for thee. My flesh yearns for thee in a dry and weary land where there is no water. He would stop by on occasions to ask me a question. And after a while, after 25 years of those questions, I finally learned he didn't come to ask me a question. He come to tell me something he had been studying, and he wanted to try it out on me. I never honestly met a man who was had a greater desire to know what the Bible had to say and how he could live that out. And so he would practice his newfound things on me. And I'd write them down, and he would hear them the next week or two, and as if they were my own. Isaiah 26, verse 8. Thy name, even thy memory, is the desire of our souls. And then one that I think probably settled in his mind. Ecclesiastes 12, verse 14. The conclusion when all has been heard is, fear God and keep his commandments, for this is the whole of man. A lot of translations have a lot of different words there, the duty of man or whatever else, but it seems like it's saying this is the whole of man, is to fear God, keep his commandments, to listen closely to what God has to say. I think Mr. B learned how to do that. And one of the things that I think he taught me that was most valuable was to be quiet and listen. Read the scriptures. Just let them soak for a while. And then go try them out. Valuable lesson. Good man, good friend, mentor, father figure. So many other things that were there. I've told folks, and I mean it, that when I grow up, I want to be like them. But I can honestly tell you, when I grow up, I want to be called maybe B Junior. I'd even settle with Travis. God bless you folks, the family, friends, all those who loved him and knew him well. I heard an older man say years ago, he said, I've got more friends on the other side than I do on this side. I've almost reached that point. Heaven's always had a draw to me. The Father, the Son, the Spirit, all those who've gone on before us, and it just gets sweeter every day. God bless you. I love you folks.
On that resurrection morning when all the dead in Christ shall rise, praise the Lord, I'll have a new life. Sold in weakness, raised in power, ready to live in paradise. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life.
I'll have a new home.
Glory, glory,
where the redeemed
ever stand. There'll be no more sorrow, no more pain, there'll be no more strife.
Yes, raised in the likeness
In
of
his likeness, I'll be glad I'll have a new body. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life. What a hallelujah morning when the last trump of God shall sound. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life. Graves all bursting, saints all shouting, heavenly beauty all around. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life.
I'll have a new home.
Glory, glory,
where the redeemed
ever stand. There'll be no more sorrow, no more pain, there'll be no more strife.
Yes, raised in the likeness
In
of
his likeness,
to live
I'll be glad I'll have a new body. Praise the Lord, I'll have a new life. When old Gabriel
Well, I shouldn't have much left to say. They said about all of it I was going to say. That was by a great design. Those things that needed to be said that I pretty well was sure that they would say. King David, when he heard that Joab, Saul's commander, had been killed, made this statement to his men: "A prince and a great man has fallen today." It's true for our family. Nobody's ever been greater. I told some people today, when I got in this family, I learned pretty quickly who was the king, and I had to find my place because it wasn't me. As been said today, L.T. Blevins had a lot of names. A lot of those have been used today. He was L.T. to a lot of church people, to a lot of business people, people that you might not recognize their names. James Cone was a successful businessman and a good friend of Mr. Blevins. You could see them together and you might not think a lot of times of what they had in common. Now, I knew and he knew they had Jesus Christ, the church, and sheep in common. They were both shepherds. There was a guy named Bill Jett that had Jetco Construction. It's been gone quite a few years. East Harding is one of those companies now that came from that. Tom Harding worked for Bill Jett and started a company called Cherokee Construction. I know a lot of this doesn't interest y'all, but it does be good to reminisce. Philip Baldwin had a company back when we were struggling to make a living to get by. Phil Baldwin gave us a check every week so we could pay whoever was working instead of when we turned in draws. They did that because Mr. Blevins was a man of integrity. They knew they could trust what he was doing. I've told this many times. When I was young and trying to get a job, bidding and not knowing much at all, I could not get a job even if I had the right bid. I would voice my concerns to Mr. Blevins quite often, and he would go talk to him and get the job. Do you think that helped my feelings any? He loved the church. The church was his real passion. All of us in the family knew that. My wife said to me many years before I became an elder, "I don't want you to become an elder." My dad's been an elder, and it took him away from the family a great deal of the time. And I've taken that to heart and have tried not to make that as much of an issue as it was to her. My girls might not agree with that, but I think we do better today maybe in a church than maybe used to be. He spent a lot of time as a shepherd. He probably, in my estimation, was the epitome of a shepherd. Not just to people in the church at Levy, but people everywhere. I expect, while nobody has ever told me this, that he was a shepherd in the family before he ever had any children in a way. He married into the McDaniel family. My mother-in-law was a McDaniel. And I don't think that I've ever known a deeper religious family with a long tradition of a Christianity. And I think he took to that really well. I have always appreciated the McDaniels. I'll just say a little of this because most of what I've written down I'm not going to say. It has been said. My mother-in-law did not care a great deal for me. Now, I know you're wondering why. I wasn't always the man I am today, and that may not be saying much. But I've got an idea that my father-in-law saw something in me that maybe nobody else did. Did you notice I walked up on this side of the stage? Everybody else walked up over here. That's who I am. And growing up, I had a lot of trouble with that. Doing things my own way. My father-in-law let me do things my own way. I think they were probably troublesome to him at times, but he still got the first time yet to ever correct me and tell me, boy, I wouldn't have done it that way. I sometimes knew immediately he wouldn't have done it that way because of the results that we had. But at any rate, I want to talk about the name Lavelle. I mentioned the McDonald family. Most of the McDonald family called him Lavelle today. My mother-in-law called him Lavelle. Kathleen called him Lavelle. Lavelle was the most endearing name he had. LT was used by a lot of people. Mr. Blevins was probably used by quite a few people. Mr. B, as you've heard, a boss. He was my boss, and in later years, I was his boss. And he called me boss. I don't know why. I called him Mr. Blevins all of the time of our time together. We had a customer named Cloud Keys, and Cloud and I had a discussion one day about Mr. Blevins. It may have been after he'd had a heart attack or whatever. He asked me about him and talked about him, and he said, you know, Bill, I find it interesting that you always call him Mr. Blevins. Why? I don't know. I didn't know how to answer that, but as you see, I remember that, and it's been many years ago. I determined that it was my respect for him that never waned over the years. How he always treated me like somebody, much more than I ever thought of myself. Now, I've said those things, and I wonder how many of you have thought some of the same stuff, some of the same thing. Mama Nola, our matriarch MacDonald grandmother, was to all of us one of the finest women that we ever knew. Sharon was writing a book for Carol one time. We were writing some memories as such, and I took a sneak peek at the book to see what she had written, and she wrote, Mama Nola made you feel like you were the very favorite, the very special one. And I thought to myself, you mean everybody thought that? Mr. Blevins did that for you, didn't he? Every grandkid has a special memory of Mr. Blevins. Something that's in there that they remember. Oh, I long to be a grandfather like that. That every one of my grandkids has something special to think of me. He was my friend. He became my friend when I was 18 years old. I told you my mother-in-law didn't like me. I was a typical teenager, too big for my britches. Most of the time they hung on my hips. She probably didn't like that. Before Sharon and I ever married, me and him and Mac and Bob and Ronald, Went fishing more than once, and they never tried to drown me. Mr. Blevins and Mac and I went fishing the night I asked Mr. Blevins if I could marry his daughter. I figured with Mac there, he couldn't refuse me somehow. They were in the front seat and I was in the back seat. We got rained out that night, as a matter of fact. He gave me my first job, got me my first job in the electrical industry before I ever went to the Army, many years before I got into the electrical business, actually. He gave my brother his first electrical job before I ever went to work for him. He gave one of our treasured employees, Mark Russenberger, a job before me. He really didn't want to give me a job. That's the truth. And the way the construction industry was and all, he turned me down the first time. But some of you know me, I'm fairly persistent at what I want. And eventually, he was my personal mentor in a church, in my profession, and in life. I have to say this to you. I get compliments all the time about stuff. And I remember one thing that he said in Tuesday morning men Bible class. It's written in one of my Bibles. I never got anywhere in life without the help of someone else. And I know that's true, and he's major to me. He'll live on in us, it's been said today. He lives on in this church. He lives on in the Arnold Blevins Company. Guys, if you work for Arnold Blevins, stand up for me, would you? Now, this is not, thank you, this is not nearly all of the guys. Here's some guys over here, too. 2 girls. Thank you. I'm sorry I didn't pay attention to you. They're some of our longer employees. A good name is more desirable than great riches. To be esteemed is better than silver and gold. The point has already been made. I am as much Blevins as I am Arnold. Sharon and I married when we were 19. She was 19. We had to wait till she became 19. Her daddy wouldn't let us get married before then. I have seen what it means to have a good name. Arnold is a good name. It was good before I got it put on me. Blevins is a good name. I know what you're supposed to do with riches. I learned that from my daddy. I learned that from Mr. Blevins. He gave generously all his life. He would give you the shirt off his back. I believe that he would give you the shirt off of his back. I have seen him give away. In our early years in business, I told him one time, you know, we ain't never going to get anywhere. You give it all away. When he should be charging people for stuff, he'd give it to them. I couldn't figure it out for many, many years, to be honest with you. I was young. I wanted to make some money. I wanted to have something. I guess he'd done been there. That wasn't his deal. Wasn't never his deal. Isaiah 57:1-2 says, the righteous perish. No one ponders in his heart. Devout men are taken away, and no one understands that the righteous are taken away to be spared from evil. Those who walk uprightly enter into peace. They find rest as they lie in death. Mr. Blevins almost died more than once in his life. He was bit by copperheads. He was in World War II. He got called back up just right before he was fixing to be discharged permanently to the Korean War. He's had heart attacks. He told us in the family he was going to live till the Lord came. Sharon says the same thing. I'm probably not. She's probably going to outlive me. He walked into my office one day a few years ago, and he said, and he sat down like he does, like I do with Jonathan. They have to listen to us. I had to listen to. He said, I want to talk to you. And he said it just about that way. He said, what do you think about me and Kathleen getting married? He ain't even told me he's dating her. What could I say? Y'all tell me, what could I say? I said, well, that sounds like a real good thing. Kathleen, you know this. I don't know how many times he told me. I've told it many times. You saved his life. Our family is forever grateful for that. We love you. Grateful for what you have done for us. Isaiah 55:6. Now let me say this. He had a lot of pain in life. He dealt with a lot of things, a lot of pain. He now has rest and peace, no question. I thought about getting up here and preaching you a sermon. You would say, no, you already done enough. I understand that. I don't know if he would have liked that, but he did like to have the last word to say. What might he say to us? Isaiah 55:6 says, seek the Lord while he may be found. Call on him while he is near. I hope you'll think about those verses, if nothing else. I know he would say, make your life right with God. I think each and every one in heaven today would say that to us. My sister-in-law, who is married to my brother who passed away prematurely, posted this yesterday on Facebook, and I'll leave you with this. Grief tells our hearts things like this. How can I possibly find joy again when so much was lost? Gratitude responds softly. Yes, it hurts, but what a blessing it was, even if only for a short time. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for celebrating a good life with us.
Bless the Lord, O my soul, O my soul, worship his holy name. Sing like never before, O my soul, I'll worship your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, O my soul, worship his holy name. Sing like never before, O my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, O my soul, worship his holy name. Sing like never before, O my soul, I'll worship your holy name. And on that day when my strength is failing, the end draws near and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, O my soul, worship his holy name. Sing like never before, Would you pray with me? Jehovah God, our Father, I've written out this prayer, Father. Be difficult if I hadn't. But what a blessing to be able to come to you and to your throne through the name of Jesus, who promised he ever lives to make intercession for us. Thank you for hearing our prayers, and thank you for answering according to your will, because sometimes our will is just not yours. I have mixed emotions as we're saddened by the passing of L.T. Blevins, but we celebrate the faithfulness of his life, your servant and our brother. And personally, Father, I thank you for his service as one of the shepherds who brought me here to leave you in 1973. And I thank you, Father, for his generosity, his leadership, and his many ways of teaching and encouraging us have been spoken here today. And thank you for this church that's meant so much to so many of us, and especially to Brother Blevins. And now my request to you is to bring your continuing comfort to this family. Give them time to grieve and strengthen each one by holding them in your arms of love and grace. And Father, we need for you to give each family member, loved one, friend, the ability to hold on to their precious memories in their hearts of all the good that he did and all the good that he was. We pray this, Father, through the resurrected one. Lord, come quickly, Jesus Christ. And the church said, amen.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before, oh my soul. I'll worship your holy name. The sun comes up, it's a new day dawning. It's time to sing your song again. Whatever may pass and whatever lies before me, let me be singing when the evening comes. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. You're rich in love and you're slow to anger. Your name is great and your heart is kind. For all your goodness I will keep on singing. 10,000 reasons for my heart to find. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh, my soul, I'll worship your holy name. And on that day, when my strength is failing, the end draws near, and my time has come, still my soul will sing your praise unending. 10,000 years and then forevermore. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never before. Oh my soul, I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name. I'll worship your holy name.
Some glad morning when this life is over, I'll fly away to wait on God's celestial shore. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, by and by. I'll fly away. When the shadows of this life have gone, I'll fly away like a bird from prison bars has flown. I'll fly away. I'll fly away, oh glory. I'll fly away in the morning when I die. Hallelujah, fly away to a land where joy shall never end. I'll fly away. Great is thy faithfulness, O God my Father. There is no shadow of turning with thee. Thou changest not, thy compassions, they fail not. As thou hast been, thou forever will be. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness. Morning by morning, new mercies I see, and all I have needed, thy hands hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. Pardon for sin and a peace that endureth, thine own dear presence to cheer and to guide, strength for today and bright hope for tomorrow, blessings all mine with 10,000 besides. Hey. And great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, Lord. Every morning new mercies I see, and all I have needed, thy hands hath provided. Great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, great is thy faithfulness, Lord, unto me. So faithful to me.
Bless the Lord, oh my soul, oh my soul. Worship his holy name. Sing like never